That, of course, was Tesla rolling out the Tesla car. The worst technological rollout since the last quick capsule review with my awful camera phone. There we go. How's it going, everybody? Tom here with Stormbreaker Films, and I am bringing you the first quick capsule review of March. I say first guardedly because I'm currently planning on trying to do another one next week to celebrate the Ides of March. So I'll let you guess what that theme could possibly be. Today we're going to talk about prototypes. We have two films here, Alien Resurrection and Rambo, that are prototypes in a way of later films that came afterwards. And Robocop 2 is kind of a prototype, but it's also the result of several prototypes, and we'll get into that in a second. But that's our theme today. Yeah, not worst sequels ever, certainly. You would be seeing a very different Alien, a very different Robocop, and a very different Rambo on this list if that was the case. I dare say these are fairly all underrated. But we'll start with Alien Resurrection since it's on the left, and that's how we do here. So Alien Resurrection, it's really a Joss Whedon joint in the sense that it is a prototype of Firefly. I just rewatched a bunch of the Alien movies lately, and that's what stood out to me. Basically all the mythology of Alien had sort of been just thrown out the window by this point. You still had, government ne'er-do-wells or corporate ne'er-do-wells doing experiments, but in this case it actually was a military group a couple hundred years after the crumbling of Weyland-Yutani, or whatever the name of the big corporation is, that has been sort of the omnipresent threat through all the other movies. Even the Alien versus Predator movie had, Lance Henriksen playing his own great grandpa. So it sort of strayed away from that corporate angle and gave it more of the government baddies. But the main protagonists, Sigourney Weaver's just sort of there as a prop. She doesn't really do that much for me. I don't know. I think she plays an alien hybrid. Why you would be hybridized with something that was a parasite ejected from your body and then you were boiled in lava, I don't know how any of that worked. But somehow she was brought back as a hybrid, which basically meant she was strong enough to beat human orangutan Ron Perlman in a game of basketball, and her blood was acidic. That was about it. She really was not the main focus of the movie. It was more of a group dynamic. So it kind of reminded me of Serenity or Firefly. But you had a kind of a ragamuffin crew of this ship called the Betty that was led by Michael Wincott. And, much like Firefly, you had sort of a ne'er-do-well type, captain, sort of like Malcolm Reynolds. You had a black first officer who was obviously a competent fighter. In this case, it was a male, but, basically like Gina Torres. And, Joss Whedon, he's done tons of ghost writing. He was one of the writers of like Toy Story. So he's good at writing group dynamics. But all the characters sort of echoed what later came out in Firefly for me, at least in this latest viewing. The aforementioned Ron Perlman is sort of like Jane Cobb a little bit, just sort of the cruel mercenary type that's also a little bit of the comic relief. You have a mysterious brunette girl who's sort of waif-like but has like unexpected capabilities in Winona Ryder. So she's sort of the River Tam type character. And the movie's fairly straightforward. This little ship goes to a military outpost for some sort of skullduggery, and they're experimenting on aliens who of course get loose, and Brad Dourif gets a paycheck, and Dan Hedaya gets a paycheck, and everybody gets a paycheck, and it was just this dumb sequel that was so vastly better than Alien 3. All respect to David Fincher as a director, but that movie is irredeemably shit. It was so much better than that one that it kind of just gets a pass. But you definitely could see the first noodlings of what would later become Firefly. They even call their ship a boat, which is something Joss likes to do. He even had like Nick Fury call the Shield helicarrier a boat. So there's just a lot of little touchstones to that, and I'll also give the movie credit and on having an interesting antagonist in the alien human hybrid. So if Sigourney Weaver is Batman in this movie, this thing is the Man Bat. It's the gross, sort of always moist looking quasi human pink alien thing with the sort of like skull like nose and where it's sort of inverted, and it dies a really horrible death, probably worse than it deserves for what it does. But it was a genuinely creepy thing with a hint of pathos, and therefore far more interesting that came in any of the Alien movies to come afterwards. So I would give this one a hard pass in terms of like, is it a must watch? No. But if you just watched Alien 3 or watched Prometheus or Alien Covenant and you wanted a palate cleanser, yeah, it's not too bad. Moving along to let's go to Robocop 2. Robocop 2 was written by Frank Miller, and it has a lot of ideas that he sort of explored prior to his Hollywood career. It has, for one, I guess the main idea in this one that is sort of recycled or upcycled is the idea of putting a sociopath in a cybernetic body because it's one of the only personality types that could actually flourish in that situation. It actually is really interesting that the little creepy guy that we saw at the start of this video who tears his own head off. That was one of a number of Robocop 2 prototypes that failed. The OCP tried to put together, and the reason they failed is even though they were policemen, they were body proud, or they weren't really ready for a life as a cybernetic organism. Whereas Alex Murphy had a Catholic upbringing and he was extremely duty oriented, so he was able to adapt to that lifestyle. And in this one, Kane, played by the wonderful Tom Noonan, is the main villain, and he kind of reminds me of I forget the villain's name, but he's an Elektra Assassin, the comic book miniseries. He put together a really horrifying villain in that one that was in a Terminator-like body that had all these special weapons, including the ability to piss acid. Like, it was just extremely tough exoskeleton, and which we find out later the only thing that can really cut through it is a ninja sword, which luckily Elektra has. But that idea that type of psychotic person would flourish in that sort of godlike body is an interesting idea. And Frank Miller actually appears in the film too as Frank the chemist, which is kind of fun. It's fun seeing him get blown up. I'm trying to think. Oh, and some of the completely sociopathic citizenry in this movie fascinates me. Like, in terms of being a prognostic work of science fiction, I don't think all the future crime in Detroit is going to be committed by middle-aged white guys, but maybe it is. I don't know. But it was funny, the demographic of the villains in this, or there's the street criminals in this movie, because you had like a little league team, and just it seems like everyone was a criminal in this movie. It was great, and this came at a point in the 90s when the violence, like, everyone was trying to like top each other, so far from where we are now in our current society, for good or worse. But it was entertaining to see such a anti-social movie come out of Hollywood. And even to the point where one of the main villains is a little kid who's just completely potty mouthed and awful and a psychopathic murderer in his own right. It was really a fascinating film. I think it's one of the ones that grows on me as the years go by, especially the morality policing that's involved, like all the edicts that are programmed into RoboCop at one point to keep him in check. He's given like hundreds of directives that make him just a complete pudding head, and seeing him enforce like quality of life crimes with extreme aggression is actually kind of relevant to today's world, particularly if you look at British society in particular. I mean, America's not far behind, but in England you need you need a pass just to buy porno, and if you say something nasty online, the police are more likely to arrest you than they are like child grooming gangs. So the scene where RoboCop shoots a circle of bullets around a guy who's smoking and horrifies him almost into a coma, like that sort of overreaction is sort of more relevant to what we're seeing today. But and the prostitutes in this movie are definitely prototypical Sin City girls. I could see some of that in play as well. So it's a good one. I think they probably butchered his original script, but having read the comic adaptation that they put together, is probably too long and rambling anyway. So they had to do something. I think ultimately, Irvin Kershner knows how to direct a sequel to a hit movie, if anyone does, and he did a good job. And let's move on to Stallone in Rambo. Um, Rambo is a special movie in my heart because it is so uncalled for. It's just so uncalled for. It's so violent. And Myanmar, they're back in the news right now because they just had a military coup. Oddly enough, because in part of they think the election was stolen by Dominion voting machines. Imagine that. But yeah, so long before the military took over and tried to save Myanmar from itself, you have Stallone and Rambo, who, by the way, it should be called Burma. I think whatever douchebags took over Burma were the ones who renamed it Myanmar. So everyone should just start calling it Burma again. Just fuck them. But this one you have Julie Benz from Buffy and Angel fame, who played Darla, the adorable vampire. She comes knocking on Stallone's door along with oh god, who's the guy? He's the guy from 24. He always plays a douchebag. Anyway, a couple missionaries basically show up to Stallone and ask him to take him by boat into Myanmar to help with some relief efforts. And he's like, "Are you taking guns? If you're not taking guns, you're not going to do anything." And they don't listen to him, of course, because they're stupid idiots. And he winds up through a convoluted plot taking them in. But it's a prototype in my mind for Expendables, because this is really the first time that you see Stallone with a cast of other badasses. They weren't A-listers like he worked with later. You don't have people like the great Eric Roberts, for one thing. But so you don't have that A-list group of players in this one. And honestly, the more A-list the Expendables movies got, the more ridiculous they were and kind of stupider they were. By the time you had Planet Hollywood, the shootout, it was just kind of like, it kind of played itself out at that point. But this one, you have Rambo, who is obviously the biggest badass. And the scene where he jumps on the 50 cal and just turns a guy into hamburger meat in the back of his own Jeep is one of the most violent and just gruesome and, I dare say, glorious scenes ever committed to film. This for me is the best Rambo movie, easily. The first one has some fun, like little socio-political things going on, and you get to see young David Caruso get threatened, but and the kind of the fun um, survivalist type shit where he's making traps in the woods and stuff like that is neat. But you know nothing beats just the sheer chutzpah and gore of Rambo. Um, and trying to think what I was gonna say. But yeah, I guess like just the fact that they kind of put together like a crack military unit just out of spare parts, and all the guys don't like each other and they're trying to like out alpha male each other. The one guy's like, "Oh, you got 1,000 yard stare. I'm not impressed." That sort of dynamic was something that Stallone definitely picked up on and expanded on with the Expendables movies. I never saw Stallone as The Last Blood, the last Rambo movie. I heard it was pretty bad, so I'm not really that into checking it out. But if you have any thoughts on that one, or any of these, please leave a comment below. So that's about it for today's quick capsule review. I just want to ramble a little bit about some middling action movies, and one great one. If you have any suggestions for things you'd like to see addressed in this series, let me know. Like I said, I'm going to be trying to come back in the Ides of March, and we'll see what we can do there. I hope everyone is having a great weekend. And that's all I got to say today. Das Vidanya, y'all.